My parents frantically called me at 2 a.m. "Your sister is in the hospital. Send $15,000 right now or she'll suffer through the night and we'll stick her with all the bills." I replied, "Call your precious son," then hung up and went back to sleep. The call from the police station the next morning. I'm going to tell you something that makes me sound like a monster. 2 weeks ago, my mother called me screaming at 2 a.m. about my sister dying in a hospital bed, begging for $15,000, and I said 4 words, "Call your precious son," then hung up, silenced my phone, and went back to sleep. And I slept beautifully. 8 hours. No nightmares. Woke up to sunshine and made myself a really good omelet. But here's the thing you need to understand before you judge me: I'm not a monster. I'm just a man who finally stopped being one family's punching bag after 31 years. And what happened the next morning when the police called? That's where this story gets interesting. Let me take you back. I'm Marcus Chen, 31 years old, mechanical engineer, and for most of my life, I was the invisible middle child in a family that treated me like a placeholder between 2 golden children. My older brother Daniel, Danny to everyone who adored him, was the firstborn son. The heir. The one my parents immigrated from Taiwan for, apparently, because every sacrifice they ever made was for Danny's future. Danny got piano lessons, SAT tutors, a car at 16, and his entire college paid for. Danny was going to be a doctor, a lawyer, a senator, whatever dream my parents were cycling through that particular year. My younger sister Michelle was the baby. The princess. The miracle child my mother almost died delivering, which meant Michelle could do no wrong for the rest of eternity. Michelle got her own bedroom while Danny and I shared. Michelle got designer clothes while I wore Danny's hand-me-downs. Michelle got a trip to Paris for her 16th birthday while I got a card that said "We're proud of you" with no cash inside. And me? I was Marcus. The quiet one. The one who got good grades but not great grades. The one who played soccer but wasn't varsity. The one who existed to fill space at family dinners and stay out of the way. I learned early not to ask for things. When I was 8, I saw a bicycle in a store window, red, with silver handlebars that gleamed under the lights, and I made the mistake of pointing it out to my mother. She looked at the price tag, then looked at me, and said, "Marcus, we can't afford things like that. Not with Danny's lessons and Michelle's medical bills." 2 weeks later, Danny got a new computer. For his homework, my mother said. Even though he spent most of his time on it playing games. By the time I was 10, I'd stopped asking. Stopped hoping. Stopped expecting anything beyond the bare minimum. I became invisible because invisible was safe. Invisible didn't get disappointed. Here's a memory that still makes my jaw tight. When I was 14, I won a regional science fair. First place. I built a working model of a hydroelectric dam that actually generated enough power to light a small bulb. I stayed up for 3 weeks straight working on it, teaching myself electronics from library books, soldering circuits in my room while my family slept. I was so proud I could barely breathe. My parents' response? My mother glanced at the trophy and said, "That's nice. Michelle has a dance recital that day, so we won't be able to come to your ceremony." That was it. 3 weeks later, Danny got a B+ on a calculus test, his first grade below an A in months, and my parents hired him a private tutor and took him out to his favorite restaurant to de-stress. I stopped telling them about my achievements after that. Things got worse when we all became adults. Danny went to an Ivy League school on my parents' dime, got a business degree, and immediately started failing. Not academically, professionally. Danny had no work ethic. No discipline. No ability to handle anyone telling him no. He bounced between jobs, got fired from 3 different companies for attitude problems, and eventually convinced my parents to fund his startup. A tech company that was going to revolutionize social media. They gave him $200,000. The company folded in 18 months. Danny blamed the investors, the market, his business partner, Mercury being in retrograde, everyone except himself. Did my parents hold him accountable? Of course not. They gave him another $50,000 to get back on his feet. Meanwhile, I worked my way through a state school, graduated with honors in mechanical engineering, landed a job at a manufacturing firm, and slowly built my career through late nights and zero family support. There's a moment I still think about. My senior year of college, I got an internship at a major aerospace company. It was competitive, thousands of applicants, only 30 spots, and I got one of them. When I called my parents to share the news, my mother said, "That's nice. Did you hear Danny is being promoted at his company?" Danny's promotion was moving from unpaid intern to paid intern at a company our father's friend owned. My actual competitive internship at a nationally recognized firm didn't even register. I stopped sharing good news after that too. When I bought my first house at 28, a modest 3-bedroom in a decent neighborhood, with a yard I could mow myself and walls I could paint any color I wanted, my father's only comment was, "It's smaller than Danny's apartment." Danny was renting a luxury high-rise with money my parents gave him. I owned property I'd earned with my own hands. "But sure, Dad. His apartment was bigger. That house became my sanctuary. I painted every room. I built bookshelves in the study. I planted tomatoes in the backyard and learned to cook real meals in my own kitchen. For the first time in my life, I had something that was entirely mine, something no one could take away or diminish. My family never visited. Not once. In 3 years of owning that house, not a single member of my immediate family crossed my threshold. But they expected me at every holiday, every birthday, every event they deemed important. My presence was required. My space was irrelevant. Michelle followed a similar trajectory to Danny. She went to a private college, changed majors 4 times, took 6 years to graduate, and emerged with a degree in art history and 0 job prospects. My parents supported her completely: rent, car payments, credit card bills, everything. When she turned 28, she decided to become an influencer. This required an extensive wardrobe, professional photography equipment, and a lifestyle that looked expensive enough to attract followers. My parents funded all of it. Her social media career never took off. Last I checked, she had about 800 followers, half of whom were bots. But the money kept flowing. The breaking point came 3 years ago, at my father's 60th birthday party. I'd saved for months to buy him a really nice gift, a vintage watch from a brand he'd mentioned admiring when I was a kid. It cost me almost $2,000, but I thought maybe, finally, he'd see that I listened. That I paid attention. That I cared. The party was at Danny's apartment, of course, and the whole extended family was there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends. Everyone gathered to celebrate the patriarch. When gift time came, Danny presented our father with a new golf club set. Top of the line. Probably $4,000. Everyone applauded. My mother wiped away tears and said, "Danny always knows exactly what his father needs." Michelle gave him a framed photo collage of their family vacations. Cute. Personal. My mother hugged her for 5 minutes and talked about what a thoughtful daughter she was. Then I handed over my gift. My father opened the box, looked at the watch, and frowned. "This isn't the brand I like," he said. I felt my stomach drop. "What? You mentioned it years ago. You said you always wanted one." "That was a long time ago. My tastes have changed." He set the box aside without trying the watch on. "But, thank you. It's fine. Fine." I'd spent months saving for fine. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came later, when I overheard my parents talking to my aunt in the kitchen. "Marcus means well," my mother was saying, "but he's always been a little tone deaf. He doesn't understand quality the way Danny does. He just doesn't have that instinct." My aunt murmured something sympathetic. "We worry about him," my father added. "He's so ordinary. Danny has vision. Michelle has creativity. But Marcus? He just works." I left the party without saying goodbye. The drive home was silent. No radio. No phone calls. Just me, the highway, and the weight of what I'd heard pressing down on my chest like something physical. When I got back to my apartment, I sat in my car for 20 minutes, staring at the steering wheel. I tried to cry, felt like I should cry, but nothing came. Just this hollow, empty feeling, like someone had scooped out everything inside me and left just the shell. I didn't speak to my family for 3 months after that. No calls. No texts. No holiday visits. When Thanksgiving came around, I told my coworkers I was spending it with family and spent it alone instead, eating takeout Chinese food and watching movies I'd seen 100 times. It was actually kind of peaceful. When I finally answered my mother's calls, she acted like nothing had happened. "You're so sensitive, Marcus. We didn't mean anything by it. You know how your father gets at parties, he's not good with words. And anyway, the toast was about Danny's wedding. It wasn't supposed to be about you." That last sentence. It wasn't supposed to be about you. Story of my life. I should have cut them off then. But I didn't. Because some part of me, some stupid, hopeful, desperate part, still wanted them to see me. To value me. To love me the way they loved Danny and Michelle. That part of me died 6 months later. Here's what finally killed it: Danny's wedding. Danny had somehow convinced a woman named Priscilla to marry him. Priscilla came from money, old money, the kind that owns buildings and funds charity galas. My parents were beside themselves with joy. Their golden boy was marrying into American aristocracy. The wedding was enormous. 300 guests. A venue that looked like a castle. My parents contributed $75,000 to the budget. I was not asked to be in the wedding party. Not the best man, that went to Danny's college roommate. Not a groomsman, those spots went to friends and cousins. I was just a guest. A face in the crowd. No different from my parents' neighbors. But here's what really broke me: during the reception, my father gave a toast. He talked about Danny for 15 minutes. Danny's accomplishments. Danny's charm. Danny's bright future. He talked about Michelle, too, How she'd helped Priscilla pick out flowers and had been such a wonderful support to the bride. He mentioned me once. And of course, Marcus is here too. That was it. I sat at my table, not even at the family table. By the way, I was at a table with people I'd never met, and I felt something inside me go cold and still. After the toast, my mother found me. "You should go congratulate your brother," she said. "Don't be sulking in the corner." "I'm not sulking. I'm sitting." "You always do this. You always make things about yourself." I looked at her, really looked at her, and I think she saw something in my expression that surprised her. "Mom," I said quietly, "I was barely mentioned in Dad's toast. I wasn't in the wedding party. I'm sitting with strangers. How exactly am I making this about myself?" She blinked. Danny wanted a small wedding party. And the seating arrangements were Priscilla's decision. "Don't be ungrateful, we paid for your meal tonight." My meal. They'd contributed $75,000 to this wedding, and my mother wanted credit for paying for my dinner. I stood up and walked out. I didn't speak to any of them for 8 months. When I finally re-established contact, it was on my terms. I set boundaries. I stopped attending every family event. I stopped being available whenever someone needed a favor. I stopped pretending that their treatment of me was normal or acceptable. This made me the villain, of course. "Marcus has changed," my mother would tell relatives. "He's become so cold. We don't know what we did wrong." "He's always been jealous of Danny," my father would add. "We tried to treat them equally, but Marcus always resented his brother's success." Michelle told anyone who would listen that I was toxic and had abandoned the family over nothing. Danny never said anything about me at all, which was almost worse. I didn't even register as worth discussing. But I was finally free. I had my job, my house, my own life. I dated occasionally. I made real friends, people who valued me for who I was. I built something that belonged to me, independent of the family that had never wanted me. I was finally okay. And then, 2 weeks ago, my phone rang at 2 a.m. I woke up in the dark, my phone buzzing on the nightstand. The screen said Mom. My mother hadn't called me in 4 months. Not since I declined to contribute to Michelle's business venture, some kind of online boutique that would definitely fail within a year. That conversation had ended with her calling me cold and materialistic because apparently not wanting to throw money at another doomed project made me the villain. I answered, already knowing something was wrong. No one calls at 2 a.m. with good news. "Marcus." My mother's voice was hysterical, that particular brand of dramatic panic she'd perfected over the years. "Marcus, you have to help us. Michelle is in the hospital. She collapsed at home. They think it's her appendix. They're saying she might need emergency surgery." I sat up, rubbing my eyes. My room was dark except for the glow of my phone. Through the window, I could see street lights and silence. "Okay. Which hospital?" "St. Catherine's." "But Marcus, listen to me. We're having a problem with the insurance. Michelle's coverage lapsed, she was between plans, and the hospital is saying they need payment up front for the surgery. They want $15,000. We don't have it." Something in her voice felt off. Not just panicked, rehearsed. Like she'd practiced these words before picking up the phone. "What about Danny?" "Danny's money is tied up in investments. He can't liquidate quickly enough. And your father and I already gave him our savings to help with his new business. We don't have anything left." Of course they didn't. Of course every cent had gone to Danny's latest venture, whatever pyramid scheme or startup fantasy he was chasing this time. Of course there was nothing left for emergencies, for practical needs, for anything that might benefit anyone other than the Golden Children. "Marcus, please. You have to send us the money. Michelle is suffering. They're saying if she doesn't get the surgery tonight, the appendix could rupture. She could die. She could get sepsis. You have to help." I was quiet for a long moment. In the silence, I could hear my mother breathing, waiting, probably already composing the guilt trip she'd deploy if I hesitated too long. "How much has Danny given you over the years?" I asked. "What? What does that have to do with anything?" "How much? All those investments you keep funding. All those businesses that fail. All those checks you write so he can maintain his lifestyle. How much has Danny actually given back to this family?" "Marcus, this isn't the time. It's exactly the time. You've given Danny hundreds of thousands of dollars. You paid for his wedding. You funded his companies. You've given Michelle everything she's ever asked for. And in 31 years, what have you given me? Hand-me-downs and dinner at Danny's wedding? How can you be so selfish? Your sister is dying." "She's not dying, Mom. Appendicitis is serious, but it's not a death sentence. The hospital will treat her whether you pay up front or not. They're legally required to stabilize her. You're being dramatic. We'll put the bills in her name. She'll be drowning in debt for years. Is that what you want?" "What I want," I said, "is for someone in this family to finally face consequences for their choices. Michelle let her insurance lapse. Danny hoards money instead of helping. You and Dad spent every penny on your golden children. None of that is my problem. Marcus, call your precious son, I said. I'm going back to sleep. I hung up. My mother called back 11 times. I silenced my phone, set it face down on the nightstand, and closed my eyes. Here's the thing, I knew I wasn't wrong. I knew my family had spent 31 years treating me like an afterthought, and I knew that the only reason they were calling me now was because they'd finally run out of other options. I was their last resort. Their backup plan. The invisible son who was only visible when he was useful. And I was done being useful to people who had never valued me. So I slept. I woke up at 8:30 to sunshine and silence. I made coffee. I made an omelet with cheese and chives. I ate at my kitchen table, looking out at my backyard, thinking about nothing in particular. At 9:15, my phone rang again. Not my mother this time. Unknown number. I answered. Mr. Chen? This is Detective Rita Morales from the police department. Are you the son of Paul and Linda Chen? My stomach tightened. Yes. Mr. Chen, I need you to come down to the station. There's been an incident involving your family, and we'd like to speak with you. What kind of incident? I'd prefer to discuss this in person. How soon can you get here? The police station was a squat brick building I'd driven past 1,000 times without ever going inside. It sat on a corner downtown, surrounded by municipal buildings and parking meters, utterly ordinary in a way that felt surreal given what I was walking into. Detective Morales met me in the lobby, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes and a firm handshake. She had the kind of face that had seen too much to be surprised by anything, and I wondered how many family dramas she'd witnessed over her career. Thank you for coming, she said. Let's talk in the back. She led me through a maze of desks and corridors, phones ringing, officers typing, the mundane machinery of law enforcement humming along, until we reached an interview room. Plain walls. Metal table. 2 chairs. Fluorescent lighting that made everything look slightly ill. I'd seen enough crime shows to know this wasn't where they put victims. This was where they put people they wanted to watch. People they weren't sure about yet. Am I in trouble? I asked. Not exactly. Detective Morales sat across from me and opened a folder. The papers inside were crisp, organized, evidence of careful documentation. Mr. Chen, I'm going to be straightforward with you. Last night, your parents attempted to commit financial fraud. I stared at her. What? They presented themselves at St. Catherine's Hospital with documentation claiming that you had agreed to pay for your sister's medical treatment. They had what appeared to be a signed authorization form with your signature, giving them access to your bank accounts to cover the costs. My blood went cold. The room suddenly felt smaller, the fluorescent lights too bright. That's impossible. I never signed anything, we know. The hospital flagged the authorization as suspicious because of inconsistencies in the documentation. When they investigated further, they discovered the signature was forged. Your parents were detained, and your sister's surgery was performed under the hospital's emergency care protocol. She's stable, by the way. My parents forged my signature? To steal money from me? The words didn't feel real coming out of my mouth. I'd spent 31 years being ignored by my family, dismissed, undervalued. But this was different. This was active. This was deliberate harm. That's what it appears. The amount they attempted to authorize was $15,000. I sat back in my chair, my mind spinning. $15,000. The exact amount my mother had demanded on the phone. She'd been calling me to soften me up, to give me a chance to agree voluntarily, and when I refused, they'd already had a backup plan in place. There's more, Detective Morales said. When we searched your parents' vehicle, we found additional documentation. Bank statements. Account numbers. Personal information. Enough to suggest this wasn't a spontaneous decision. They planned this. It appears they've been collecting your financial information for some time. They had documents dating back several months. I thought about all the times I'd visited their house. All the times I'd left my jacket hanging in the hallway. All the times my mother had asked to borrow my phone just for a minute. Mr. Chen, I have to ask, did you have any indication that your parents might attempt something like this? I laughed, a hollow, broken sound. Detective, my parents have spent my entire life treating me like I don't exist. They've given my siblings hundreds of thousands of dollars while barely acknowledging me. Last night, my mother called and demanded I send money immediately, and when I refused, she called me selfish. So no, I didn't expect them to commit fraud. But I can't say I'm surprised they thought they were entitled to my money. Detective Morales nodded slowly. Your parents are being charged with attempted fraud and forgery. Your brother and sister are not currently implicated, but the investigation is ongoing. My brother. Is Danny involved in this? We're not sure yet. Some of the documentation found suggests he may have provided assistance in gathering your information, but we haven't confirmed that. Of course. Danny wouldn't get his hands dirty with the actual crime, he'd just enable it and let our parents take the fall. What happens now? I asked. That depends partly on you. If you want to press charges, we'll proceed with prosecution. If you prefer to handle this privately, you can decline to cooperate, and the case may not move forward. I thought about my mother's voice on the phone. Your sister is dying. How can you be so selfish? I thought about 31 years of being invisible. I thought about the watch my father had dismissed. The wedding where I sat with strangers. The thousands of small cruelties that had accumulated into something vast and cold and unforgivable. Press charges, I said. The next few days were chaos. My parents were released on bail, paid for by Danny, because of course it was. My mother left 17 voicemails on my phone, ranging from tearful apologies to furious accusations that I was tearing this family apart. Danny texted me once, "We should talk." I didn't respond. Michelle was released from the hospital with a mountain of medical debt, which my parents had no way to pay. She posted on social media about her near-death experience and how some people showed their true colors during her crisis. The comments were full of sympathy. No one knew about the fraud. I kept my head down and let the legal system do its work. The detective kept me updated. My parents had hired a lawyer. They were planning to argue that the signature had been a misunderstanding, that they genuinely believed I'd given permission. It was ridiculous, and they had to know it wouldn't work. But they were still trying to manipulate their way out of consequences. 1 week after the incident, Danny showed up at my house. I was making dinner, nothing fancy, just pasta and vegetables, when the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on a kitchen towel, crossed the living room, and opened the door to find my older brother standing on my porch, dressed in business casual like he was heading to a meeting, his expression carefully arranged into something resembling concern. He looked older than I remembered. More tired. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there at his wedding, and his hair was thinner at the temples. But the posture was the same, that confident, entitled stance that said the world existed to accommodate him. "Marcus. We need to talk." "No, we don't." "5 minutes. Please." I should have closed the door. I should have told him to leave and called the police if he refused. But some part of me, that stupid, stubborn part that still wanted answers, still wanted to understand how my own family could do this to me, stepped aside and let him in. Danny looked around my living room with an expression I recognized, subtle condescension. He took in the modest furniture, the bookshelves I'd built myself, the framed photos on the walls. My house was nice, but it wasn't impressive by Danny's standards. It didn't have marble countertops or a rooftop terrace or any of the luxury finishes he'd grown accustomed to while spending other people's money. "Nice place," he said, which meant the opposite. "What do you want, Danny?" He turned to face me, and for a moment, his mask slipped. I saw something underneath, fear, maybe. Desperation. The expression of a man who was used to having all the cards and had suddenly realized the deck was stacked against him. "I want you to drop the charges against Mom and Dad." "Why would I do that?" "Because they're your parents. Because this is going to destroy them. Because our family's reputation will be ruined if this goes to court." "I don't care about the family's reputation." "You should. It affects all of us." "No, Danny. It affects you. You're the one who needs Mom and Dad's connections. You're the one who relies on their money. I haven't depended on this family for anything in years." Danny's expression flickered, a flash of something ugly beneath the polished surface. His jaw tightened. His hands clenched at his sides. For a moment, I saw the real Danny, not the charming golden boy, but the entitled, resentful man underneath. "You're really going to do this? You're really going to send our parents to prison over $15,000? It's not about the money. It's about the fact that they tried to steal from me. They forged my signature. They've been collecting my personal information for months. That's not a misunderstanding, Danny. That's a crime." They were desperate. Michelle was in the hospital. And whose fault is that? Michelle let her insurance lapse because she expected someone else to cover her. You hoarded your money instead of helping. Mom and Dad gave away everything they had to fund your failures. None of that is my responsibility. Danny's jaw tightened. "You've always been jealous of me." I laughed. "Is that what you tell yourself? That I'm jealous? You've resented me since we were kids. You've resented Michelle too. Because we were special and you were just average." "I'm average." I nodded slowly. "I'm average. I paid my own way through college. I built my own career. I bought my own house. And you, the special one, are 34 years old and still cashing checks from Mommy and Daddy. Tell me, Danny, how much of your lifestyle is actually yours?" His face went red. "You don't know anything about my finances. I know you couldn't come up with $15,000 to help your dying sister. I know Mom and Dad said your money was tied up in investments. I know you've had 3 failed businesses funded by other people's money. I know exactly what you are, Danny. You're a parasite wearing a suit." For a moment, I thought he might hit me. His hands were clenched, his breathing heavy, his eyes bright with fury. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. "You think you're teaching everyone a lesson, but all you're doing is isolating yourself. When this is over, you won't have a family anymore." "I never had a family," I said. "I had people who looked like family but treated me like a stranger. Now I'm just making it official." Danny stared at me for a long moment. Then he walked out without another word. The case moved faster than I expected. My parents' lawyer advised them to accept a plea deal, reduced charges in exchange for guilty pleas, no prison time, but probation, community service, and restitution. The restitution was symbolic. They didn't have money to pay me, but it was on the record. Official acknowledgement that they had wronged me. They took the deal. The day of the hearing, I sat in the back of the courtroom and watched my parents stand before a judge and admit to forging my signature with intent to commit fraud. My mother cried. My father stared straight ahead, jaw set, refusing to look at anyone. Neither of them looked at me. Michelle sat in the front row, supporting them. Danny was there too, whispering to their lawyer, probably trying to minimize the PR damage. When it was over, I walked out before any of them could corner me. That night, I sat on my back porch with a drink in my hand, just ginger tea, nothing stronger, and looked up at the stars. The sky was clear for once, scattered with pinpricks of light that had traveled millions of years to reach my eyes. I thought about how small we all were, really. All our family dramas, our grievances, our desperate bids for love and recognition, they were nothing against the vastness of the universe. But they were everything to us, I felt. Strange. Not triumphant. Not vindicated. Just tired in a way that went deeper than sleep could fix. The kind of tired that comes from years of holding yourself together, from building walls so carefully that you forget there's a person behind them. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You destroyed our family. I hope you're happy. Michelle." I read the message 3 times. Destroyed our family. As if the family had been whole before this. As if I hadn't spent my entire life standing outside looking in, watching through glass while everyone else celebrated together. I blocked the number. Then another buzz. Danny this time. "Mom had a breakdown after the hearing. She's been hospitalized. Is this what you wanted?" I stared at the message for a long time. Was this what I wanted? I thought about the question carefully. What had I wanted, really, through all of this? I'd wanted to matter. I'd wanted to be seen. I'd wanted 31 years of being dismissed and diminished to finally mean something to someone. I'd wanted consequences, real consequences, not just me suffering in silence while everyone else continued their lives unchanged. But my mother in a hospital? My parents with criminal records? My family shattered beyond repair? I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt tired. And maybe a little sad for the family we could have been, if they'd only made room for me. I didn't text Danny back. But I didn't block him either. Some part of me wasn't ready to close that door completely, not out of hope, but out of, I don't know, acknowledgement, maybe. That these people, however badly they'd failed me, were still connected to me by blood if nothing else. 2 days later, I got an unexpected visitor. My aunt, my mother's younger sister, Aunt Grace, showed up at my door. Unlike my mother, Aunt Grace had always been kind to me. She'd sent birthday cards with real messages inside, not just signatures. She'd asked about my job and actually listened to the answers. She'd quietly acknowledged, in the few conversations we'd had over the years, that my parents' treatment of me wasn't fair. At family gatherings, she was the one who sat next to me while everyone else clustered around Danny or fawned over Michelle. She'd never said anything directly, never confronted my parents or called out the disparity, but she'd made me feel seen in small ways that mattered more than she probably realized. "Marcus," she said when I opened the door. "Can we talk?" She looked nervous. Her hands were clasped in front of her, and she kept glancing at the street like she was worried someone might see her here. I wondered if my parents had told her not to come. I let her in. Made her tea. Sat across from her in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd made countless meals alone, where I'd celebrated promotions with no one to share them, where I'd quietly built a life separate from the family that didn't want me. "I'm not here to convince you to drop anything," she said immediately. "What your parents did was wrong. I told your mother that years ago, the way they treated you wasn't right, and she never listened. So I'm not going to defend them." "Then why are you here?" "To tell you something I should have told you a long time ago." She took a breath, and I saw something in her eyes, guilt, maybe. Or regret. When your parents first came to America, they had almost nothing. Your father worked 18-hour days. Your mother took any job she could find. They scraped and saved and sacrificed everything for one dream, that their children would have better lives than they did. I know the story. But here's what you don't know. When Danny was born, your parents made a decision. They decided that Danny, as the firstborn son, would carry the family's legacy. He would be the one they invested in. He would be the one who made all their sacrifices worth it. That's not exactly a revelation, Aunt Grace. I'm not finished. She set down her teacup and looked at me, really looked at me, in a way my own parents rarely had. When you were born, your parents were already struggling. Danny's piano lessons, his tutors, his private school, it was all so expensive. They were stretched thin, barely making ends meet. And then your mother got sick after Michelle was born. Really sick. She almost died. And Michelle became this symbol of survival, this miracle they had to protect. So I was just in the way. You were the one they didn't know what to do with. Aunt Grace's eyes were sad. Danny was the investment. Michelle was the miracle. And you were the child who didn't fit into their plan. It wasn't fair. It was never fair. And I should have said something sooner. I sat with that for a moment. The weight of it. 31 years of wondering why I wasn't enough, and here was the answer: I was never supposed to be. I was an afterthought in a narrative that had been written before I was born. Why are you telling me this now? Because I want you to understand that what happened isn't about who you are. You're not invisible because you're unworthy. You're invisible because your parents built a story about their family that didn't have room for you. And that's their failure, not yours. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. What you did, pressing charges, holding them accountable, it was hard. I know it doesn't feel good. But it was also the first time in 31 years that you refused to let them erase you. That matters, Marcus. You matter. I didn't cry. But something in my chest loosened, a knot I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. What do I do now? I asked. Now you build a life that doesn't depend on their approval. You find people who see you. You stop waiting for validation that's never going to come. She stood up. And if you ever need anything, anything at all, you call me. You're more my nephew than you've ever been theirs. It's been 2 weeks since my parents' hearing. My mother is out of the hospital. It was a stress-related episode, not serious. My father has reportedly lost several business contacts because of the fraud charges. Danny's investors are asking uncomfortable questions about his family situation. Michelle's boutique never launched. I haven't spoken to any of them. But last week, something unexpected happened. I got an email from a recruiter. A major engineering firm in Seattle was looking for a lead project manager. Someone had recommended me, someone who'd seen my work on a recent contract and been impressed by what I'd accomplished. I flew out for an interview. It went well, really well. They offered me the job on the spot. Better salary. Better title. Better city. A fresh start. I'm packing my house now. The house I bought with no one's help, in the city where my family never bothered to visit me. I'm wrapping dishes in newspaper, filling boxes with books, sorting through years of accumulated life. It's strange, going through everything. I found old photos, family holidays where I'm always on the edge of the frame, graduation pictures where my smile doesn't quite reach my eyes, birthday cards from relatives who remembered I existed even when my parents forgot. I'm keeping some of them. The ones from Aunt Grace, mostly. I'm selling the house to a nice young couple who are expecting their first child. They walk through every room with such excitement, talking about nursery colors and backyard barbecues and all the memories they'd make within these walls. I hope they do better than I did. I hope their children all feel loved equally. I think they'll be happy here. As for me, I'm going to Seattle. I'm going to build something new, a life without the weight of family expectations, without the constant reminder that I was never quite enough. And for the first time in my life, I'm going to do it without the burden of people who never wanted me. Here's what I've learned from all this: families are supposed to lift you up. They're supposed to see you at your worst and love you anyway. They're supposed to make sacrifices not for golden children or miracles, but for everyone, equally, unconditionally, without calculation or preference. My family never did that. They built a hierarchy and put me at the bottom. They loved conditionally, and the conditions were never ones I could meet, because they'd decided long before I was born that I wasn't worth the investment. But that's not my burden to carry anymore. I pressed charges against my parents. I cut off my siblings. I walked away from everything I was taught to believe was essential: the family dinners, the holiday obligations, the endless forgiveness of people who never apologized. And you know what? I'm okay. More than okay. I'm finally free. Last night, before I sealed up the last of my boxes, I found the watch. The vintage one I'd bought for my father's 60th birthday. It was tucked in the back of a drawer I rarely opened, wrapped in tissue paper I didn't recognize. He'd given it back to my mother, who'd given it to Danny, who'd apparently left it at my parents' house, where my mother found it while packing for her community service. She'd mailed it to me with no note. No explanation. No apology. Just the watch. I turned it over in my hands, feeling the weight of it, the cool metal against my palm. It was still beautiful. Still valuable. Still exactly what my father had once said he wanted, in a conversation so long ago that he'd forgotten it entirely. I thought about throwing it away. Thought about selling it and donating the money to charity. Thought about mailing it back with a note that said I don't want anything from you. I thought about 100 different ways to make it mean something, to turn it into a symbol or a statement or a final word. Instead, I put it on. It fit perfectly. Like it had been made for me. Sometimes the things we give to people who don't deserve them can find their way back to us. Sometimes the value we offer is rejected not because it's worthless, but because the people we're offering it to don't know how to appreciate anything beyond themselves. Sometimes, the greatest gift we can give ourselves is taking back what was always ours. I'm keeping the watch. And every time I look at it, I'll remember, I was enough. I was always enough. They just couldn't see it. If you've read this far, thank you. I know this story makes me look cold. I know some of you are thinking I should have helped my sister, should have forgiven my parents, should have kept the peace. But peace built on your own erasure isn't peace. It's just silence. And I was silent for 31 years. I'm not silent anymore. To anyone out there who's been the invisible child, the overlooked sibling, the one who never quite measured up no matter how hard you tried, you're not broken. You're not unlovable. You're not worth less than the people who got more. You might just be stuck in a family that doesn't know how to see you. And when you finally get free, when you finally stop bending yourself into shapes that don't fit, stop accepting crumbs from tables overflowing with feasts, stop believing that their blindness is your fault, you'll realize something amazing. You were always whole. They were the ones who were missing something. Now if you'll excuse me, I have a plane to catch. Seattle's waiting. Update, 1 week later. I wasn't going to write more, but something happened and I think you all deserve to know. I'm in Seattle now. Found an apartment with a view of the water, nothing fancy, just a small one-bedroom with big windows and good light. Started my new job. Everything's been going well, better than well, actually. My new team is collaborative, my boss actually listens when I speak, and for the first time in years, I wake up excited about the day instead of dreading it. The city feels right. There's something about the rain, the mountains in the distance, the coffee shops on every corner, it feels like a place where people can start over. Where the past doesn't follow you quite so closely. But 3 days ago, I got a call from Detective Morales. Mr. Chen, I thought you'd want to know. We completed our investigation into your brother's involvement in the fraud case. I was standing by my window, watching the ferries cross the Sound. My stomach tightened at her words. And? Daniel Chen has been charged with conspiracy to commit fraud and identity theft. We found evidence that he provided your parents with your banking information, including account numbers and passwords he accessed without your authorization. The ferry was pulling into the terminal now, tiny figures moving on the deck. Everything looked so peaceful from up here. So ordinary. How did he get my passwords? According to our investigation, during a family gathering approximately 8 months ago, your brother installed a keylogger on your laptop while you were away from the device. He then used the information he gathered to help your parents build the documentation they used in their attempt. I sat down hard on my new couch. 8 months ago. That would have been my father's 63rd birthday party, a smaller gathering than the 60th, just immediate family at my parents' house. I remembered leaving my laptop open on the dining room table while I helped my mother in the kitchen. Danny had been in that room alone for at least 20 minutes. Danny. Golden boy Danny. Perfect Danny who could do no wrong. The firstborn son, the family legacy, the one who was supposed to make all their sacrifices worthwhile. He'd hacked my computer. He'd stolen my identity. He'd helped our parents plan a crime against me. And he'd walked into my house 2 weeks ago and called me jealous. He'd looked me in the eye and acted like I was the one tearing the family apart, when the whole time he'd been the one who made the fraud possible. Mr. Chen? Are you still there? Yeah. I'm here. What happens now? Mr. Chen will be arrested and charged. Given the evidence, his lawyer will likely advise him to accept a plea deal. He's looking at probation and possibly some jail time, depending on how the case proceeds. I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat in my new apartment, looking out at the water, and thought about my brother. Danny had never worked for anything in his life. He'd coasted on charm and connections and our parents' money, and he'd gotten away with it for 34 years. He'd treated me like competition he didn't need to worry about, an obstacle beneath his concern. But apparently I'd worried him enough to commit a felony. I thought about calling him. Saying something. Demanding answers or explanations or some kind of acknowledgement. But what would be the point? I already knew why he did it. He did it because he could. Because he'd never faced consequences. Because in his mind, I was just Marcus, the invisible one, the ordinary one, the one who existed to be used. Well, not anymore. I blocked Danny's number. I blocked Michelle's. I sent a text to Aunt Grace letting her know what happened, and then I put my phone down and went for a walk by the water. The air in Seattle smells different than back home. Cleaner. Newer. Like a beginning. This will probably be my last update. I've said what I needed to say, and now I need to focus on building my new life instead of dissecting my old one. But if anyone's still reading, here's one more thing. My parents sent a letter. Not an email, an actual handwritten letter, mailed to my Seattle address. I don't know how they got it. I didn't open it. Maybe I will someday. Maybe I'll be curious about what they have to say, now that all 3 of their children have been touched by criminal charges, now that their perfect family narrative has collapsed, now that everything they built has crumbled. But not today. Today, I have a meeting with my new team. Tonight, I have dinner with a colleague named Sarah who seems like she could become a real friend. Tomorrow, I have plans to explore my new city, to learn its secrets, to make it mine. My parents' letter is sitting on my kitchen counter, unopened. It can wait. They made me wait for 31 years. Fair is fair. Final edit. Someone in the comments asked me what I'd say to my younger self, the 14-year-old who won the science fair and got told his trophy was nice. I've been thinking about that question for days now. Thinking about what that kid needed to hear, what might have made the next 17 years easier to bear. I'd say, you're going to carry this hurt for a long time. You're going to twist yourself into knots trying to earn love from people who don't have it to give. You're going to waste years, decades, believing that if you just try harder, work longer, achieve more, they'll finally see you. They won't. Not because there's something wrong with you, but because there's something wrong with them. But here's the thing, one day, you're going to stop. You're going to look at everything you've built, the career you earned, the home you created, the life you made with your own 2 hands, and you're going to realize it was never about them. It was about you. Your worth. Your value. Your life. And when you finally understand that, when you finally let go of the people who can't hold on to you, who were never going to choose you no matter how much you achieved, you're going to feel something you've never felt before. You're going to feel free. Hold on, kid. I know it hurts now. I know you're wondering what you did wrong, why you're not enough, why they look right through you. But none of that is your fault. You're not invisible because you're unworthy. You're invisible because they built a story that didn't include you. Someday, you're going to write your own story. And it's going to be so much better than theirs. It gets better. It gets so much better. I promise.